It's an unfortunate inevitability that when you play the old car game, at some point you're going to find yourself rolling to an unscheduled stop. You could cry, phone your mother, or forget you bought it in the first place and get a cab. Or you could do something about it. And in this video, I'm going to look at things that maybe you could do to get yourself going again. Because when these stop, unless you've got a rod sticking out the block, chances are there's something not too bad to do. So we're going to have a look at a few different things you can action, what to look for, and how to get yourself rolling again. Welcome to Badger Lodge Garage. So this video is going to comprise of a couple of parts, I think, just to keep things simple-ish. The first one, we're going to look at how to diagnose what system in your engine is not working, and then we'll focus in on one or the other and how it works and what to do with it. And I might also show some useful tools. Blimey, it's dark through here. Give me some light. Ah, there we go. I'll probably also suggest some useful little bits and pieces, tools to keep in your car that'll just help you no end when you're trying to diagnose what's gone on. Because no matter how amazing your car, how reliable, how fantastical, and every time it starts, first time, you know, they're still getting on now, these cars. They're over 50 years old, a lot of them. And there is a fact that some component somewhere is just going to go, no, I don't want to play ball anymore. And that's it, you stop. And usually the component is not a complicated one to fix or replace. So that's what we're going to look at. So, you bought a classic car. She's conked on you. You're at the side of the road. You don't know what to do. You're new to the game. So what do you look for first? Well, you've got to think, firstly, what a petrol engine requires to run are three main things, if you like. Compression, fuel and spark. And the reason you've stopped is more than likely you've lost one of those. We're going to forget about compression in this video because chances are, if you just cruise to a stop, unless you've got something catastrophically wrong with your engine, you've not run out of compression, you know, there's going to be something that's going to need more than just roadside work at that point. So we're going to think about fuel or spark, and they're going to be the more common things you're going to lose. And this is focusing on petrol engines, by the way. I will talk about diesel engines, but I don't have a diesel to, you know, show with. So you're stuck with this for the time being. So quite commonly on most petrol engines, you've got spark on one side, and then you've got fuel on the other, in the form of a carburetor and a distributor and a coil. And you've got to decide which one you haven't got is why you've stopped. So the most quick one, I think, to decipher what you've got is spark. Now, you might need two hands sometimes, but in this instance you actually don't. I didn't bring the correct size socket with me because that was clever. But all you need to do to see if you've got spark is either take a spark plug out of the block, ground it on something, because the engine is part of the circuit. You know, because if you don't know about cars or you're new to it, you might not realise that the body of the car makes part of the circuit. That's how they work. That's how you only have to run one wire. That's why the earth strap goes to the body. So if you were to run a bulb from the battery with a bulb and a piece of wire, all you'd have to do is touch somewhere else and the bulb will light up. So all you have to do is take a spark plug out, ground it on the engine and get someone to turn the engine over. If you're on your own, it might be a bit more difficult. If it's a Morris Minor in its original, you can turn the ignition on, sort of wedge a spark plug somewhere, wherever you like, and you've got a starter button under here. And then you'll see if you've got a spark straight away, straight at the plug, and then you'll be able to know what's going on. If you have got spark, then you can move on to fuel, or vice versa. Fuel, again, is not hard to find. It's a liquid, so if you've not got any of it, it's fairly obvious. What I tend to do is, if you've not got fuel, to take the fuel pipe off. This car has got a filter in it that you can just look at and see if it's pumping through. It doesn't always tell you what you need to know. So take the fuel line off, point it away from anything that's hot and glowing, because you know that can make your day much worse. If you've got a container, even better. And in this instance, with an electric pump, all you have to do is turn the ignition on and see if you've got fuel squirting out the end. If you've got fuel squirting out the end, this is good. This means it's getting this far. If you haven't got fuel squirting out the end, could be fuel pump. If the fuel pump's ticking and nothing's coming through, you could have a blockage, or you might have run out, because let's be honest, it's happened, hasn't it? I've not. Yeah, I've done that before. If you are getting fuel to here and you've got spark, chances are you could have a carburation issue. Now in this case it's an SU. These are very nice carburetors. They're fairly basic. They have one moving part when you're driving, apart from the vacuum chamber that sort of does its own thing in there. And if you just take 3 screws out the top, because I'm working on the basis that if you've got a classic car you should probably have a few screws. See if you've got fuel in the float bowl. If you haven't got fuel in the float bowl, then the needle could be stuck. It's blocking off the fuel getting in. On some carbs, if you just give it a quick clout with the back of a spanner or a screwdriver, it might be enough to free off the needle from its seat and it lets fuel back in. But that's unlikely to happen if the car's been running. I'd say it's more likely to stick open and you get flooding and whatever. So if you've got fuel in the float bowl and you have got spark at the plugs, you could also have a blockage in. That's when you're looking at having a potential blockage in the carb. Now on an SU like this, it's not very common unless you've got a massive great chunk of something come through, as these have just got one pipe and a bloody great jet with a needle in it, and there's not much that bungs them up. But most carburetors of the standard downdraft type, you can take the whole top off, blow it out with some brake cleaner or carb cleaner ideally, put it back together and see if it goes. They're not too scary. I'll have to get another one. I might take it apart and show you what's going on. Because if you have got fuel and you have got spark, the engine will run. It is nearly that simple. If you haven't got spark, that can be taken down to a couple of things. Something in the distributor or the coil. That is it. If you've taken a spark plug out, you've got no spark on the end of it, you might want to just pop your distributor cap off as a first point of call, make sure there's nothing funky going on. Now we were talking about, if you look at my other video a little while ago, I talked about points and what they do and how they work. So I'd suggest if you want to have a bit more of an in-depth look, go and look at the other video. But in that video I basically said that points need to open and close to make and break the circuit to trigger the coil. And that's what they're doing, they're being a switch. So a quick and easy thing to do on one of these is to pop the cap off, press the starter button, and see if you can see the points opening and closing. It's quite hard to see here, but that's a quick and easy first thing to look at. If they are opening and closing, as you can see, it's quite a new set. It's actually a brand new distributor because the previous one just disintegrated completely. It's running well. Some people say these new distributors aren't very good, but this one seems perfectly fine. Your points are opening and closing. It's worth checking you've got power in the first place going to the coil. So now you're getting into possibly more tools required. All you need is a bulb or a test light. If you've got a test light, that's a very useful thing to have. I would recommend everyone has a test light on hand, which I've actually forgotten today, which is really helpful. But you need to find out if you've got power to the coil. So you need to find the feed wire that's coming from the ignition, which is going to be one of these two. And I'll be honest, I can't remember which one it is. That's the points, I think. Yeah, because that's got ballast on that side. So this is your, when you turn your ignition on at the key, you should have 12 volts going to the side of the coil that's connected to the ignition, and the other side is the trigger to the points. And I'll talk about coils in a separate video because it takes a little bit more thinking about and more than I'm capable of in this ramble today. But if you've got 12 volts to the coil, you're off to a good start. That means you've got power to the key, from the key to the coil. If your points are opening and closing, that's also a good sign. If it still doesn't start, you've now narrowed it down to one or two things: coil or condenser. If your condenser's knackered, chances are it might have shown some kind of issue, like a misfire under load, but it will also cause a no start situation. Coils tend to die slowly as well. They can get hot and then they'll just stop working. That's when you lose power and stop. And then you'll probably find it'll restart again after it's cooled down. That's a key sign of a coil, but they don't tend to go very often, especially not original ones. This is a new, probably finest Chinesian one. It's been on there a couple of years. Seems to still be going, but time will tell. Getting back to the point, I would suggest that if you've got to this point, you've got 12 volts, your points are opening and closing, you should have a spare points and condenser set kicking around. It's always just useful to have that. So chuck it on, and if the car starts, you're away, because it was the condenser or the points. If it still doesn't start, you could have a coil issue. Now, you don't always have them kicking around, but at least by that point you would have satisfied yourself that you've done as much as you can do. So to recap then, fuel, spark. You've either lost one or you've lost the other. If there's something worse like compression is lost, you're not going to get yourself going at the side of the road necessarily. And that's not what this video is kind of about. This is just sort of basic stuff. It is as simple as, see, have you got fuel in there? And do you have electricity coming out the end of a spark plug? It's always worth keeping spark plug sockets, a test light, which I will look into more in the next video. This is part one, by the way. It's a bit of a ramble, but I want to kind of break it down a little bit better. I've got another carburetor that we can have a closer look at, and then we can, take it to bits and see what could go on there. But yeah, fuel in there, spark out of there. The entire ignition system compromises in its most basic form of these two pieces here, and a power feed from the key. So as long as you've got power to the coil, opening and closing points that do actually open and close, then you've narrowed it down quite drastically. So in the next video, so I'd say I've kind of done this in the wrong order. So if you want to know a bit more about what causes a no spark situation with a distributor like this, go and watch the points video, which is a previous one, and that'll say kind of all you need to know about that, because I'm really organised like that. Next time I'll look at this, what this is doing and how that sort of talks to the points, because that's what the points are there for. They're there to trigger this to shoot the spark at the right time. So yeah, basically, as long as you've not got a rod sticking out the side, it's not too scary. That is it. That is the entire, that's what makes it go. So thank you for watching this first one, and in the next one we shall look a little bit deeper into what makes these go. And in the meantime, there's going to be some more stuff as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time in part 2.